mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Population control is the only answer. And then you've got others like, again, Paul Ehrlich, quote, "I would take even money that England will not exist in the year 2000. Well, I'm in England at the moment, and I can vouch for the fact that it still exists. But this was the fear-mongering campaign that dovetailed the so-called global cooling threat in the 1970s.
Now, I want to explain to people, one facet of hundreds is the animal ID and the premises ID. Now, only Texas, quote, passed it into law, but then you read it, it's only regulatory, and once you sign it, but everybody else is signing on, because if your kid's in 4-H, you show up to 4-H, they escort you with police off the premises. If your family farm hasn't been registered, the big agribusiness wrote all this into law. They have exemptions, like they'll have one tag per 1,000 chickens that's $14, but you've got to have a $14 tag or a $10 tag, depending on the tag, per chicken yourself. It's written to shut down people that only have 100 chickens or 20 chickens or 30 cows. They even admit this in their own documents, and now idiots that signed on to the thing in Texas, a cow dies. They've got new people that spy. If a cow dies or gets struck by lightning, you don't report it within 48 hours, $2,000 a day fines, then they take your farm. You're signing over. It's not even a law. It's a corporate agreement where you go into these, quote, public laws, just like there's no law to take vaccines, but they'll still take your kids if you don't, in many cases, if they think you're ignorant and, they don't go after wealthy people that they know can find them. They only go after the ignorant. I mean, this is just lawless criminality. Animal ID, premises ID, when you sign the agreement, now they're coming on your property for no reason. I mean, this is just where they're making everyone criminals, going after all self-sufficiency, and they say they want to force us off the land into cities. I mean, this is total control where only Big Agra owns the food, and then they can force you to eat the GMO as well. Paul, elaborate.
Well, it ties into what Daniel Estelin talks about, which is what the Portuguese politician Barroso has talked about in Bilderberg meetings, which is the desire to bring about a, quote, post-industrial revolution, which essentially means the complete evisceration of the middle class.
Now, let's explain again. The Industrial Revolution broke up the monopolies. Where to have any business, you had to be certified by the local nobleman, who was, again, certified to the queen or king. They admit this. They want to end their competition. Okay? I mean, they'll be dumping toxic waste in the streets. They don't care. It's about the power to come in and selectively regulate and shut down. Go ahead.
Right, and it's about, with the oil agenda, Bilderberg said that the plan was to get it up to $200 a barrel. And what is it today? 108, 109. It's going to get up there eventually.
It's over 109 right now.
And the more you hike oil prices, the more difficult Westerners find it to maintain their living standards, and they get lowered towards the second, status level.
But they built our transportation and our economic grid on sprawl, on highly separated urban centers, where you have to do this, and now they've got a stranglehold and can squeeze everything out of us with the fuel. Go ahead.
Exactly, and that's why at the previous Bilderberg meeting, Kissinger said there were plans to double the price of oil. That happened. The next step is $200 a barrel. So that's where they're heading, and they've said on record that it's about creating this post-industrial revolution and squeezing the middle class into non-existence to create, their dream, the masters and the serfs, just like it was in history. They want to reintroduce it.
Now, I want to add here, Paul, that people debate whether this financial collapse that's happening is by design or not. In their own documents, they admit, and we've quoted and covered those here, and as I've said many times, even the Financial Times of London has admitted, they had the power to put out endless currency, endless credit, endless liquidity. They decided to do it. And then now that they got the bubble to full size and almost everyone is leveraged out into debt, and then once things implode, even if you've, quote, got some currency, they're at the same time devaluing it while prices go up and while the economy contracts. They'll then just bankrupt all their front banks, which they're going to do. But in the meantime, with that fiat bubble they created, giving themselves the lion's share of that fiat currency, they bought up the mines, the roads, the water districts. They bought your politicians. They bought the movie theater chains. They bought the ranching companies. They bought the meat packing companies. They bought them all over the world. So this wasn't even done as a free market exercise of, quote, consolidation and monopoly capitalism. This is global economic warfare with then, they now admit the military shifting over to rapid response teams for civilian revolts where they're going to control all the governments, but they're going to need rapid reaction, 10,000-man forces to go in and just machine gun and bomb. And that's what the British Ministry of Defense report says as well. So it's all public in the intellectual government policy reports and planning documents for what they're doing. This is a hell world run by them where they own 95% of the resources and they centrifugal create the crises to suck out that last 5. Once you're all in lockdown grid cities, then they release bioweapons and exterminate us. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and even I read a Reuters report today that said, you know, even when Bush or Bernanke say that the policy of the United States government is to have a strong dollar, that means that the policy is to have a weaker dollar. So you've got even the establishment media admitting that they just engaged in direct doublethink, and every time Greenspan or Bernanke, you know, get an opportunity to talk about the dollar when they're abroad in places like China or Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, they always badmouth it. They told the Arabs to remove the dollar peg 2 weeks ago.
That's it. Let me add to that. In fact, that's where I didn't add my final point when I got off into my pontificating. The evidence that they're imploding it by design is that Greenspan, Bush, Bernanke, the head of the Bank of England, all of them run around bad-mouthing the dollar. But then they have to publicly deny they're killing it. So Bush says, we're not even in a recession. We have a strong dollar. These are quotes. We're in a bubble neck right now. The bubble's going to continue. Everything's fine while doing that's like when a military attacks your fortress. They're bullhorning, this is not an assault. So you just hesitate long enough so they can get the job done. It's meant to confuse. It's meant to where you're going to figure out they're lying, but it still kind of makes you stop and debate for a moment. It's like they publicly write books calling for world government, world taxes, taking all your freedoms, but then Richard Haas will go on CNN and say there's no move for a world government, there's no Amero. Because then they know the debate will be about how they're liars and is it real instead of do we want this. So the dollar's gone, we're imploding, we're on fire, mayday, mayday, mayday. It's already sucking England and Europe down with it. But again, the elites have pre-positioned their police state grid. They're bringing us into this global crisis, which will then fully shear us to the bone. Paul?
Oh, yeah, they've got the solutions already in place. That's the whole point. It's order out of chaos. But, I mean, when Bush talks about the dollar and Bernanke talks about it, that's not going to get across to the U.S. audience, but it is registered in the Arab states and in China and places like that, and that's why the dollar continues to crash. And, you know, you had the expert on a few days ago who said that the toilet paper would be worth more than the dollar in 2 years. And Bush doesn't even admit to the fact that the U.S. is in a recession, and how they hide that is by, you know, making the inflation numbers and the unemployment numbers, massaging them and keeping them secret, which is what Ron Paul confronted Bernanke about in the committee meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago. And Bernanke was sat there smiling like a Cheshire cat, because obviously he knew everything Paul was saying was absolutely on point, but he still just blithely repeated these mantras about strong dollar and inflation being under control when everybody knows that it's complete hogwash. And
here's the problem. Only 25% in every major poll indexed, some are 20, some are 30, but it's about 25%, will still believe whatever the government says. But the problem is the majority of them are what I call mid-level technocrats. They make 200, 300 grand a year. They work at computer companies. They work in executive positions in government. They think they're the government because they're overall good people, though they're arrogant and full of hubris, and they think the whole government's like that. They haven't seen the compartmentalization. They feel like they're part of the system. So at a subconscious level, they then defend the government no matter what it does. And we still have some time, reverse some of this and have a somewhat soft landing, crash landing, because as things get crazier, they're getting crazier as they have to, with cognitive dissonance, keep buying more into it. And so, see, Bush is speaking to them, the technocrats, going, don't worry, you're in control, everything's fine. Heaven help us, Paul.